You see, I'm a simple college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver here in the States. I've purposely locked myself out of all media and the internet aside from school purposes. That means no 4chan, no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time, I would just replay my Crystal version on the Game Boy Color. But I realized that long ago my mom threw it away because I told her the save went dead, and I was very upset about it at the time. She also threw away my Silver version, so all I had was my Game Boy Color. As such, I sent out to GameStop and bought a used Silver version. It was the only Poke game left, and they had the GBC $10 fairly cheap. I went home and started up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things started getting bizarre. Most likely the reason you're listening to this. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the cart was just errored or something, so I turned it off and on. Same thing happened. I tried pressing A and start over and over, and all the buttons. Eventually the logo vanished and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in the previous saved file, which was odd as I was expecting all these carts to have been wiped out by a poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining. I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. First off, I checked his trainer information. His name was just ... He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile and apparently he had 999 hours put in the game with all 16 badges. 99999.9 Poké Dollars and all 251 Pokemon on the Pokédex. Seeing as he apparently had Myuu and Celebi logged also, I'm guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back then. I checked his Pokemon to see what a badass team he had, and to my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I was thinking this must be some cruel joke by the person who last played this game, but I decided to check the profiles of those Pokemon anyways. As expected, they were different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil. Mind you, this was before they were individualized Pokemon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was level 5 with only 1 hit point, left with only 2 attacks, Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time, I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon had said their usual cries. Just pure silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was parked at what appeared to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there was no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if just leaning on its side. There was no music at all, and there was no exit or ladder. Or, at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes, but couldn't seem to find a way out. This was certainly not a room I've seen in the Bellsprout Tower before. I checked my items for an escape route, but the bag was completely empty. There wasn't any wild Pokemon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder, which turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black and the music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized that melody. I remembered it to be the thing you hear when you listen to the radio at the Alpha Ruins where the unknown are at. I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room and would need flash. Before I took care of that though, I immediately checked my Poké Gear to change the radio to something more pleasant. But it turns out that there was no radio card or even a phone or time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold from ... from earlier, and I'll be calling him Gold from now on, was just walking in the midst of black. I recall that Cyndaquil had flash, so I turned off my Poké Gear and made Cyndaquil use flash. I didn't see any message saying hurry use flash or anything like that. The room just became lit, just like that. And I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red with a linear gray path heading south. The ladder I used to go up or down wasn't there. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made until I finally made it to the end, which appeared to be a sign. I read the sign which said, "Turn back. Now." Suddenly I was asked the answer, yes, no. But there was no question asked. I chose yes, as I didn't know what it was asking, and the screen went black again, making a ladder climb sound. The unknown radio music stopped. In a few seconds was replaced by the not as creepy Pokéflute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used flash again. Suddenly it said that Hurry has fainted, which is odd since I recall there was no status conditions like poison on him, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. I checked my Pokemon quickly, and he wasn't in my party anymore. In fact, after a bit of investigation, none of my Pokemon were there, but instead all replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. My then team of unknowns spelled, "He died." Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appeared to only be 4 squares big. The walls of that room were great bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appeared to be a bunch of grays similar to the ones in Pokemon Red and Blue. I walked around the small room and pressed A, but nothing happened. I already concluded that this was clearly a hacked game and some sadistic fuck sold it to a GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... again, only to find out the Sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also seemed to appear less smug, but rather seemed more sad and empty in a way that I don't know how to describe. For some reason, it also said that he also had 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimlessly wandering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope spinning animation. Instead of flying up, though, my character spun downwards, slowly, as if sinking. After that screen, the music stopped. After finally landing, the overworld Sprite of Gold was colored differently now. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appeared completely white now, including his skin. It's as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and now as white as his overworld sprite, he lost his legs and had what appeared to be bloody tears from his eyes. It also said he had now 32 badges, which now started to disturb me as this change of number seemed to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, which this time contained 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown at this time leveled 15 spelled out dying. Check the Celebi profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there's only like half a sprite. One leg, one arm, one eye. It only had one attack. Perish song. The area I was in was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillars before, except everything was apparently red now. I walked north for what felt like forever. Eventually, I finally encountered some genetic men and women NPCs. They were all lined up to the sides, just facing a long slanted pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happened when I tried to speak with them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar finally appeared to just chop off the transparent red in that spot. I went out to ride, and without pressing A, I was suddenly engaged and finally in a battle. And the music started up again, which it sounded like the unknown radio music again, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matches his front one with the bloody eyes, white skin, and lack of arms, while red sprite was the same as before in the GSC, except transparent. The text simply said, "Wants to battle," as if he had no name. And both of us only had one Pokemon each, which is weird, which I could have sworn I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out conveniently with a half sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise in the animation was different, as the sounds it made sounded like multiple screech attacks used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal Pikachu, except his level was 255 and his sprite seemed sad and had tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item Pokemon run menu, I was only given the option to use the attacks. Since Celebi only had one attack, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering his speed and increasing his other stats. I'm not even sure Pikachu could use Curse. Celebi used Perish Song. In 3 turns, both Pokemon got KO'd. Not like I have a choice. At this point, it didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. Also note that there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail, which didn't do much damage despite his level and boost as his health was maxed. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happened as it was already used. Pikachu used Frustration, which did a shit ton of damage, knocking Celebi down for less than 10 hit points. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me because Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu had about 150 hit points. Pikachu used Mean Look. Not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi fainted. Except in the text it said, "Celebi has died." And instead of the ordinary drop off the screen animation, the Celebi back sprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up, even with Perish Song, and it didn't count as my loss. Pikachu used one more different attack beyond the 5 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards it said, "Pikachu has died," with a slow fade out animation. Apparently, I was the winner as the transparent red sprite showed up and said, ... At this point, I just freaked out at that transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I was back in the overworld with another change to the gold sprite. He was now as transparent as Red's overworld sprite. I quickly checked Gold's profile, where this time the only thing remained of him was his head, with the transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated that he had 40 badges. I then backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which, when spelled out, read, "No more." I was at what I now know to be the next... I was at what I now know is next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but for some reason I still felt like something was there that could be heard. I was back in my room in the new Bark Town. Maybe finally I'd get to play the game properly. But who was I kidding? I knew that sadistic fuck must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, so I was a bit afraid going downstairs to see what was awaiting me down there. No, I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his transparent limbs at all while doing so. Just floating like those ghosts you see in Diamond Pearl. As expected, the radio, computer, and TV didn't work, so I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower level room of my house. Everything appeared normal except Mom wasn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside at the south didn't work, and instead, I just walked straight into a void. I continued moving south to see what the fuck was going on. My house vanished as I headed south into the void. It was creepy as when I entered the void, the outline on Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a wide area, and Gold's sprite turned black and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it. He said, "Goodbye, forever." Notably with space in between the forever and ... and vanished. As this happened, it said, question mark, used nightmare. Which at this point, I would not deny being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downward like before. I was now back in that hollowed out room, surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least I say I was back there, as there was no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around, but nothing moved. Not even wall bumping noises. I checked my trainer profile with absolutely no gold sprite left. It said I had 0 badges, and all the pictures of the Johto gym leaders and at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, spelled out a phrase which I dared to read. I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I supposedly was in was covered in the same blocks as the walls. I then figured out what exactly this room was, and the final text was R.I.P. That room was a big grave, surrounded by other graves. Gold was already dead. He died, presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempting to become a Pokemon Master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death. And his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. I was unable to escape from the text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game and the same thing happened. which I finally decided to give up on that horrible game. After that experience, I will never look at that gimmick Unknown the same way again. They say that only the first generation have folktales and legends. But the second generation have shown me how unpleasant the truth can be. I eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but I still can't unthink what that frigid game has told me.